Hi everybody, this is Carissa and I am doing a tutorial today using distress markers for Craft Warehouse. The colors that I'm going to be using today are Rusty Hinge, Dried Marigold, Tattered Rose, Wild Honey, and Pine Needles. I'm using this stamp by Penny Black called Mum the Word, and since I'm going to be watercoloring, I have a water brush, some watercolor paper, and Ranger Archival ink, which is permanent and waterproof. So let's get started coloring. First, I'm going to ink up my image and stamp it on the watercolor paper. I'm using 140-pound cold press paper, but you can use whatever you have on hand. I do suggest if you're going to be using water, definitely use a watercolor paper. It just takes that heavy saturation a lot better than your regular paper. When you're coloring with distress markers, I have found that it's a lot easier to take the stamp in sections. I just add a little bit of color. It keeps it nice and saturated, and then I'm able to move it around better with the water brush when I take it in little pieces at a time. One of the great things about the distress markers is that they do blend nicely. You can see that I used a wild honey and pine needles to create that great kind of light and dark green on the leaf and the stems. Now for my shadows on the petals, I am using dried marigolds, and then for my lighter color, I am using tattered rose. So what I like to do is just place my shadows first, and then add my lighter color towards the tip of the petals, and then I'll blend those two together with the water brush. This technique is really fast and easy to color. It doesn't take any time at all. Watercoloring isn't kind of a perfect, you don't really want a perfect looking image. Using the watercolor, the effect is to have that kind of splotchy look, and that's just what gives you that watercolor look. So I'm just going through here with my petals, and I'm just taking it a section at a time, adding my dried marigold and my tattered rose and blending it together with the water brush. These markers actually layer really well together. You could even take your tattered rose, and once it's dry, add another layer of tattered rose, and you'd get a nice variation of color, light shadows and darks. You can see here I'm adding a little bit more color to my leaf and my stem. One thing that you do want to remember when adding color is make sure that that area is completely dry. You can see I'm using my heat gun to dry it here. You don't want to try to use your marker to color on an area that's already wet. You're just going to get frustrated when that marker won't work anymore. So the next technique that I want to use is coloring directly on the stamp itself. So I'm taking my two colors again, Wild Honey and Pine Needles, and just kind of randomly adding some light and dark. It doesn't have to be perfect. One of the things I love about watercoloring is that it doesn't have to be perfect. You can just let yourself go. And so I'm using the tattered rose all over on the petals. And then I'm going to add some dimension just here and there with the dried marigolds again. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of randomly add there, you're going to get that dimension. So one thing you want to keep in mind when you're coloring on the stamp is give it a huff of air before you stamp it, just to reactivate that ink. And there you go, it stamped beautifully. You can leave it like this and use it on your project, or you can go in and use your water brush to draw out that color and bring a different effect to your image. So doing this will actually make it look a little bit more like a painted watercolor because you don't have any of those black harsh lines. Another thing to keep in mind when you're watercoloring with the water brush is to always clean off your brush on a paper towel or the side of your paper when you're moving on to next color. So when I'm moving from the green to the pink of my petals, you'll see that I kind of touch the side of my paper, and that's just to remove any of that excess green before I go into the pink of my flower. So that's it. Really two unique techniques to use your distress markers for. I want to thank Craft Warehouse for inviting me to do this coloring tutorial. I hope you all have a great day.